We're in the holiest season for Judaism. We're up at Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And so today on Austin Faith Dialogue, our topic is the music of Yom Kippur. Stay with us for Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
We're glad you've joined us today for Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host, and our topic is Yom Kippur, the highest and holiest season in the Jewish calendar. Specifically today, the music of Yom Kippur. And so our guest is Cantor Neil Blumoff from Congregation Agudas Achim. It's good to have you.
Thank you, Sandy.
And talk a little bit, would you, Neil, about what it is that draws people. Yes, it's a holy season. Yes, it's an important day. But what is it about Yom Kippur, in your experience, that brings hundreds of people back to the synagogue?
It's an interesting question. It seems that in human nature there's certain ritualistic or community events that do bring people or draw people back to introspection or to community or to whatever. In the spring, that would be something like the Passover. And that's something where people sort of have dinners in their homes that are evocative of leaving from slavery from Egypt to freedom to Israel. But Yom Kippur is something completely different. Yom Kippur is called in English the Day of Atonement. And another way of looking at atonement is the Day of At-One-ment. And it's really a day of introspection, a day of casting off perhaps what you've considered to be your faults or your bad deeds or something that you've done amiss in the previous year, and really trying to start anew. So it's a new year, because a few days before would be Rosh Hashanah, which is the beginning of our new year. And Yom Kippur is 10 days after, which really stands for to start the new year off on a good foot. And it's something about coming back to yourself and coming back to your community and really reestablishing a relationship with God or with a force of nature that draws people back.
And now your ministry is primarily through music. So what, in your experience, is it about the music for Yom Kippur that's such a draw over the years and centuries?
This is the holiest of seasons, as you mentioned. And it's true that the music has developed to be a very powerful point of identification for people. The language is Hebrew. The surroundings are as familiar as they are when one attends synagogue all the time. It's very different to have 1,000 people in a particular place rather than the customary, say, 100 or so. So the surroundings are very different. So people are looking for a way that's an easy or a meaningful entry into prayer, into something that perhaps they're not comfortable with all year long. And the music has developed to be both a timeless melody, timeless ways that people can get into their faith and to discover these themes that we spoke about, God and community, in a way that really brings people in a way that words never do.
So music then is a different way of connecting for the congregation. Is the role of the cantor or the music that's presented any different on Yom Kippur?
The fundamental role is the same, although the stakes are higher, as it were. The theological aspects of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is that we're being judged for who we are, by God, by others. It's our reputations that are at stake. It's who we are, what kind of people we are. And I have many names as the liturgist of the community. One of the names in Hebrew is Shaliach Tzibur, which means the messenger or the spokesperson for the community. So everything has to be in order, and it's a very heady feeling to feel that you're in such it's a dramatic time and in a time of knowing whether life and death is at hand.
And quite a responsibility to stand before God as a representative of the people. Talk a little bit about the Kol Nidre, which is the music that sets the tone for the service.
If you would think that there would be a Jewish anthem, if something that would identify immediately the Jewish prayer experience for any Jew, whether a synagogue goer or not, it would be Kol Nidre. And Kol Nidre is sung on the evening of Yom Kippur. And it's a simple melody, but at the same time it really resonates with people for some mysterious reason. The text of the words, it's it's a pretty formulaic thing. It's a very legalistic thing. It's not mystical at all, really. It just talks about anything I've done in the past year with with God, sort of erase that or let me start over. But it's the tune itself that really makes it powerful, and I'd like to sing a little bit of it.
Please.
So if you're in a synagogue and you're sort of unfamiliar, it's sort of you're in your best clothes and it's a different scene. You have this one lone voice singing or speaking out of so many. It's a very different experience. So. Kol nidrei v'rei v'charamei v'konamei v'chinuyei v'kinusei u'shavuot dindarna odeishtabana odeacharimna v'dasarna al nafshatana.
So having set the tone then, asking God's forgiveness, what comes next in the service?
Then you sort of talk about it a lot. You set the tone, the music is established, and that's the musical motif that's really used throughout Yom Kippur. That simple melody is sort of the sound, sort of the radio station you're turned to. And you walk in, and that's, however that makes you feel, either experienced or inexperienced, again, it's what dictates the message of Yom Kippur. The interesting thing about it, and what my choir will demonstrate, is the timelessness of the melodies and how you feel about it. This is called, in Hebrew, a machzor. This is a prayer book, and it's a collection of both prayers and poetic responses to God throughout 1,000 years or even longer. And it's really, in every generation, people find their own voice in how to communicate with God. And there was a period where all these prayers or all these poems or all these creative ideas were put down in writing and collected, and a lot of them are in the machzor as it is now, and a lot of them fell out. But along with them came the tunes, and along with them came the power of the music. So even though we might be singing about something that somebody wrote 600, 700 years ago, it's the freshness of how we approach the message of it, how we say it, that really makes a big difference, and really evokes the feelings of presence and of dealing with the situations that we have, of feeling forgiveness and knowing that as perhaps imperfect as we were in a year, the year to perfect ourselves or to get to that perfection, and to speak about the images of Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. The text is to be inscribed, your name to be inscribed in the book of life. So we're really shooting for life. We're really hoping that that works out for us, you know?
Yes, and there's power, of course, in the individual voice, but there's also power in the collective voice. So let's hear from your adult choir.
That'd be great. What I'd like to have them sing is something that is a congregational melody. It's beautifully done by the choir, but it's something that, again, comes in waves throughout the day. It's called Avinu Malkeinu, and the literal translation of it is our Father, our King, sort of beseeching God to pay attention to us.
Amen.
My experience of music and being out as a member of a congregation during a service is always a very powerful one, either joy or sadness or whatever's evoked from the music. What do you observe happening in your congregation as this music is sung?
It's really a feeling that's indescribable. It's a feeling that, at least in my experience, watching and looking at the congregation participating in prayer, because at its root, music is meant to be joined in, whether singing or listening, active listening, or by experiencing it somehow. And it's a way of communication that is perhaps not as present to us in our wordy world, but music is and it still becomes the highest form of expression. And it's a way that the most erudite person can walk into a synagogue and sing, and somebody with no education can walk in and sing. Someone with a beautiful voice can sing, and somebody without one can sing also. And it's really a way to at once populist, but at once most majestic as well.
Reaches people on so many levels. Neil will come back for the second part of the show in just a minute. We hope you'll stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue for more good conversation and beautiful music. Glad you're here for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. And our topic today is the music of Yom Kippur, the most solemn day of the Jewish year. And our guest is Cantor Neil Blumoff of Congregation Agudas Achim and the adult choir of the congregation. They're here to sing once more for us, and then we'll come back to conversation. All that's been sung so far has been in Hebrew. And in some Christian churches, there might be an attempt to sing in the language of the people to make the worship more accessible to people. Is that a concern in Judaism, or is there some value in preserving the original language?
It's a very good question, and it's a matter of debate about how much Hebrew, how much of the original language to keep in, and how much to do responsive readings in English translations of texts. But I believe that that's where the music, the power of the music, is all the more sacred and all the more present, is that in the music, you can ask yourself the question, does everyone know everything that they're singing all the time, or even what they're saying all the time? And the music sort of takes on a life force of its own to imbue the language of Hebrew, which in Hebrew is called Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue. And in my opinion, there might be something lost when you get away from that and you try to make it more accessible. As we've seen, cultures come and go and languages come and go. But this is the language that, again, it was written in, and this is the language that was communicated to us thousands of years ago. And as we sing and as we dwell upon the larger themes of the High Holy Days, of Yom Kippur, we're really bringing along the history of our people. It's not just about us in the contemporary Austin, Texas, in the synagogue at Agudas Achim. Our voice becomes linked to our ancestors. Our voice becomes linked with the troubles and the turmoils of our age. We're singing and we're participating in a living memory and a living remembrance of a hope for the future. And as we link ourselves to the past, we grow together to the future. And
so what was the choir just singing? What were the words?
That was the piece of music called Enosh, not limited to the High Holy Days. It's sung at introspective occasions. And it literally means that a person's life is but a fleeting one. And there's a lot of imagery evoked, like a passing blade, like a passing wind as one's days go before them. And what's it all about? Why are we here? What's the value of thinking about why we're here, and where are we going? With these types of thoughts, we really, I think, can imbue our lives and make them stronger, which I think is, people do know that, and so they come out in force on Yom Kippur to ask these very questions. And Enosh is part of our liturgical heritage and asks these questions in a very beautiful musical setting.
Mm-hmm. Even though I didn't understand the words, I could feel something of the spirit. I wonder if there's any correlation between how music acts in some faith groups as a method of evangelization, as people sing the words, come to believe more, and say, yes, I want to join whatever group this is. If music also functions in the same way in Judaism, as an entry point for new believers.
It certainly is. Music is a living spirit. And to have it be an evangelical force, it's not. But if one prays authentically, you can't help but be enthusiastic and want to join along in that sense. One who walks into the synagogue, and it's not just new believers. It's people who are there who perhaps don't know Hebrew. Many Jews don't know Hebrew. Many Jews don't know the order of the service, don't know the real reasons or the reasons behind Yom Kippur in the first place. They just know in their mind somewhere that it's something that they need to do, and they find themselves in the synagogue. It's the job of the spiritual leaders, of the cantors particularly, to communicate to them wordlessly through music and draw them into the service. There are many different ways of doing that. Not everything is as beautifully precise as we've had it. There are, in the language, perhaps some ecstatic moments where there's wordless songs being sung that bridge services together. And there's ways that people can communicate and just feel swept along if they're not feeling that they're accessing the words appropriately.
And now we've heard you sing and the choir sing. I assume there's congregational music also, and if that's the case, what would the entire congregation be singing?
They would sing sort of the first song that the choir sang. They sang Avinu Malkeinu, and they sang it in a very beautiful and directed way, but that would be something that I would sort of lead into, and people would just sort of pick it up. It would be a congregational melody. I don't actually use my choir on Yom Kippur or on Rosh Hashanah, and they're acting tonight as sort of as part of the educated laity, the educated congregant.
Now, I assume new music is being written, as it is in many faith traditions all the time. What differences do you find between the more contemporary music, say for Yom Kippur, and the more ancient music that you've been presenting here?
Traditionally, there was no instrumentation in the synagogue. So a lot of the music, a lot of the melody lines that we have are lines that are just added, organ or guitar is added later, whereas the contemporary music depends upon the accompaniment, depends upon the guitar and the organ as well. And there's a lot of beautiful contemporary songs. The weight of the traditional music, like the Avinu Malkeinu that was sung, like the Kol Nidre that I sing, there's no known author for those songs, and that somehow makes it better in a way, that we can't attribute that, this person, this composer, was thinking about it in this particular way. It really does blend into the fabric of the community of Israel, the community of Judaism, really participating in an organic and spontaneous moment. And whether you want to call them folk songs or traditional songs, I think that as time passes and our contemporary music today becomes part of this fabric, I think the rhythms of our synagogue life will dictate what we keep and what we don't keep. There is a place for contemporary music in our worship. It just has to be judiciously taken along with the tradition as well.
Now we have time for one additional piece from the choir. If you've got something else that they could sing for us, I know everyone would be glad to hear that.
I'd like to do another piece. Let's do an up-tempo piece. It's a song of peace, no pun intended. It's a song of peace and hoping that no matter where we are in our spiritual quest, in our thinking about God and our thinking about what our lives should be like or would be like, that we hope that we can all get along and have the freedom to be able to do that, to think without fear of persecution or retribution. Okay. It's called Oseh Shalom.
Thank you.
Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'akol Yisrael, Ve'akol Yisrael, V'imru Amen, V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'akol Yisrael, Ve'akol Yisrael, V'imru Amen, V'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimroma, Ya'aseh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'akol Yisrael, Ve'akol Yisrael, V'imru Amen, V'imru Amen.
That did change the tone quite considerably.
And a contemporary piece.
Thank you, choir. Now, we've got about 2 minutes left. Perhaps there's something else that you would like to make sure that people know about Yom Kippur before you blow the shofar for the ending of the service.
The shofar is one of the many symbols of the age. Yom Kippur is found, its original source, we think, is in the Torah, which is the oldest document that we have that tells about a day of something, a day of celebration, of introspection. And it's full of a lot of ritual, but it's a very contemporary message that we have. The idea being that no matter how isolated or estranged you feel from the community, let alone yourself, there's always a place open for you in the worship, and it's never too late to go in and ask these bigger questions. Because whether or not we think about it, we're asking these questions all the time anyway. And it's wonderful to have and comforting to have a sanctuary in which to do it and in which to learn about who you are, and part of which is the religious heritage.
Thank you, Neil, and thank you, choir.
This shofar sort of sounds the end of the shofar of the Yom Kippur service in the day, and after which we've been fasting all day, which is another subject. But then we go and have a little bit of a party. Okay, so I'd like my choir if they can give us the traditional sort of notes that give us the blast, and there's a way that we do this. So please.
Yes. It's been a pleasure to have you all on Austin Faith Dialogue today.